We're going to be talking about controlling the conversation. We're going to be using an agentic approach to talk complex data with AI chatbots. I'm Marcus Wilkins. I'm the lead data scientist for InformData, and I actually got Domo's 2025 AI Visionary of the Year award for the exact thing that we're going to be talking about in this presentation. Thanks. You might want to wait till after to clap, though. I don't know if you're still going to like it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. And we're going to start this with the thing everyone loves most, an icebreaker. Yeah, right? I am going to time the amount of time it takes for us to answer that question. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask people to go ahead and just raise your hand and just give me what is the process for creating a detailed report where you work. And it has to be detailed, no simple questions, but a complex business intelligence report where you work. Any volunteers to start that off? All right. A lot of energy. Thank you. I saw you put your hand up first there. What do you got?
Send an email to the help desk that I need a detailed report. 30 minutes.
Perfect. So let me rephrase this slightly. Any analysts out there making the reports? What is the process for creating a detailed report? Hand up right behind the gentleman. What do we have?
So typically, an end user reaches out to our project manager, then submits a Jira ticket. That ticket is then...
And that's great. That's all the time we have, because at our company at InformData, it takes about 81 seconds on average to change the way we understand our business. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. You can see that at the time we pulled these numbers for this presentation, we've run about 225 reports year to date using this method, and the average cycle time to get one delivered and in your inbox ready for actionable insights is 1:34. Let's talk a little bit about InformData, because you got to know what I do to see what I'm reporting on, right? Otherwise it makes no difference. And this is actually going to play in heavily to the rest of this presentation. InformData is a people data company, and what that means is we have national criminal data. So you can see there that we have over 2,000 data sources covering over 90% of the US population. We've got criminal records and court data. Among that population, we have 1,800 automated court research jurisdictions. We've got international data, 200 plus countries, and there's only about 220 countries in the world that are currently certified, so that's most of them. We have continuous activity monitoring, and we're one of the few people in the industry to offer something like this, and actually the only one to do it continuously. We have sex offender registry data. We have resume verification data, so where you work, who worked with you, what your job was. We have medical compliance data, medical exclusion data. We have motor vehicle records and CDLs, all sorts of DOT things, and we do some government work. The common theme here is that the data we have provides trust. And this is so core to our business, which our headquarters is in Georgia, that they actually took the software engineering team down to a place called the Atlanta Bench. And they did a graffiti wall with the local street artist there with the word trust on it. So it's very, very key that what we provide is accurate, truthful, because a lot of times people take this stuff and, it's always the downside of the background checks, like we keep the bad people out. But it's also the opposite of that. It's your first job. You want to get your education verified for that. It's buying a car. It's buying a home. It's advancing in your career or putting a license that you earned through hard work to use. Milestones in people's lives, and we got to make sure the data is accurate for that. So I know what you're thinking, hearing all this. There's one question on your mind about chatbots with all the PII that I just talked about. All the social security numbers and criminal records and personal histories and addresses and everything else with a chatbot. And that is, and I'll tell you, if you were in cybersecurity, that wouldn't even be censored when you asked it. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into how we are using the chatbot with it, I'm going to give everyone a refresher on a term they've probably heard a million times. What actually is a chatbot? So when you think of a chatbot, you probably think of something like ChatGPT. It's an interface. But essentially, at its core, what it actually is, it's a virtual assistant that uses some sort of machine learning, large language model, and natural language processing to mimic a natural human conversation while adhering to conventional speech patterns and expectations. So we can just ask it stuff. So you can go to this tool and you can ask it what you need, and it responds like a human for the most part. And in the workplace, that's great. It can answer questions about information you're asking, context found in the information. It can create very basic calculations and formulas if you provide it the right stuff. And it can apply a curated common sense understanding of a lot of different things. In GPT, the P stands for pre-trained. This is information that's been given to it and that it's been fed over and over and over, and it's trained on until they get it to a point where it seems to respond properly. And it can write passable haikus, as you've seen for some Facebook comments from time to time, except that one's not really relevant right now. So, with that being said, sounds great, right? But you've all used a chatbot for something where you've got some garbage back. Because the P means it's pre-trained. There's only so much it can know. Even models that have access to deep learning on the internet are going to fall apart the second that you introduce any business-specific terms to the chatbot, because it's very unlikely that it's been trained on that. And doubly so if those business-specific terms are backed by someone asking them in a slang way or with bad grammar or making it even more difficult for the chatbot to understand. So, taking the security piece of this way out of the equation, the problem with a chatbot in the workplace is it isn't reliable at scale. Unless it's agentic. And before we go any further, I'm actually going to start this by showing you the actual agentic chatbot that InformData uses currently to do those 225 reports that we talked about at the beginning of this couple minutes back. Here it is. This is DAISY. DAISY stands for Data Analytics and Intelligence System. It was named that in a company-wide IT call where that was chosen as the winner, and that guy got a nice little gift card and the rights to name our proprietary AI. This is the interface. It's very basic. We've got a couple different tags on it to indicate business-specific terms, clients, vendors, automation agents. It allows us to indicate that specific words we type in aren't just misspelled English. That's the client's name. It's proper. You should see that. And it's got a thing on the left that allows you to choose columns that you want in your answer regardless of what you put in the text box. Different places for people to interact with it. This is the user side of it. How this might come up, imagine you're in an executive meeting for a sales team one morning, and someone says that some clients have mentioned feeling a slowdown in orders sent to the data den for completion. Someone responds with, "Were these in California? Their network went down for 2 weeks last month over there." Someone said, "No, I've heard similar things from accounts in North Carolina recently. I wonder if there's a trend." And someone followed up with, "Have we started sending them more orders recently?" This is an investigation at this point. You're probably going to get dinged. If you're an analyst, I know you're going to get dinged because I got dinged for this kind of thing all the time when I was an analyst. How would we solve this with DAISY? Well, I've gone ahead and I've typed the question into it. I'm going to play this clip. And you can see that they've gone ahead and requested a report from the data den, where you can see the data den indicated as a vendor because it's been tagged as such. And I'll go ahead and have it pull that question out a little bit further so you can see the details of what we're working with here. And it's okay for people in the back that can't read that. Once we ask the question, it's going to go ahead and pull it up a little bit bigger for you to read, and we'll go over what it says. So this individual said, "I need a report on turnaround time hours," and they used an abbreviation, "and the volume behind it for orders sent to the data den over the last 3 complete months. Only include criminal search history products. Exclude those orders from California." And then they've gone ahead and said, "Build the report as," and they've put a long stream of text in there indicating the exact columns they want, including specific columns that are asking for custom calculations that would not be in the data set based on a term that the AI already doesn't know. And then it has a bunch of other things about formatting. It's asked for actual hours increased or decreased. And then at the very bottom of that, it's gone further. It said it wants the actual months referenced in the column titles. It wants state : before every state. And it wants to see the state with the largest TAT increases between 2 months ago and 1 month ago first. Do you think in its current state that you could take this question and put it into ChatGPT and get a workable report? No, you couldn't. But when you put it into Daisy, this is what gets delivered to your inbox. Exactly what you asked for in about 90 seconds. All the SQL that it used to custom write this from the data set that it chose to write it from, and everything else you need at the very bottom there to see what it used to get you your answer. This is the table it created. As you can see, it fits our formatting perfectly as we requested in one try. It's got its percentage calculations. It's got its actual hour delta calculations. And it's got the vendor information that we wanted from the data den. We don't have a company called the data den. I should say that so my legal team doesn't get too upset. This is all fake data. But more importantly, as you can see, we have extremely complex SQL. Traditional AI chatbot is not going to be able to write that kind of SQL based on the information you give it from your business. But even more importantly than that, here's the actual start and complete time of that workflow, so you believe me. Under 2 minutes. It took 90 seconds. That's how we do it. That is in basics of an agentic workflow. I wanted to show you that first so you know what we're about to get in here for the rest of the conversation, and that you know I'm not just standing up here lying to you the whole time about how powerful this stuff can be. But we should get started by talking about what makes an agentic workflow, what is it, and why is it better than a typical one-try transaction that would not have been able to generate that information. An agentic workflow is a personal assistant that doesn't just do one task. It can even be a team of personal assistants, depending on how far you build it out. But it's a living, thinking workflow that when you interact with it is going to carry out a series of tasks in order, much like a to-do list, and actually generate you a final product instead of just taking your question and giving you a single answer back based on your question. It works more like an interactive journey than a single transaction. So it's going to think along the way. It's going to refine its work. It's going to QA its work. It's going to do things based on its work and take actions based on the results of other actions it's taken before them. And why is it better than a one try? Well, like I said, it learns from each step, and it adjusts based on new information or feedback it receives. And there are multiple checks and refinements, so that means you get fewer mistakes and better outcomes. More importantly, it allows you to introduce custom business lingo into the workflow. That third one there is probably the biggest point in the AI industry right now, in my opinion, because everybody out there understands how difficult it is to build something like ChatGPT. But what is great is that means that you can take something like ChatGPT and adapt it to your workplace. If you want to write a report in a spreadsheet program where you work, does your CEO get on the phone and say, hey, we need to develop Microsoft Excel's competitor program? No, of course not. You open up Microsoft Excel, maybe you've designed some business-specific, macros or whatever, but you're using something that the industry that developed the program has already perfected in a way. It's already done a lot of work getting to that point. The companies out there that are making these ultra-powerful LLMs right now have already done that step for you. They've built the tool. The trick is going to be how you take that tool and you adapt it to your place of work. Going back to why it's better, I've gone ahead and used AI-generated art, which I'm not proud of, to give you this picture here. Very basic. I just couldn't draw that myself. But the one on the left there is a one-try transaction. This is what happens when you ask a chatbot for an answer. The one on the right is an agentic workflow. The one on the left, the chatbot is going to take all that information you gave it, get overwhelmed by it, and try to give you an answer all at once based on it. The one on the right, each agent in the agentic workflow is going to do its own thing. It's probably going to do it properly. It's going to get you a nice clean meal. But the difference here is because it's a chatbot, the one on the left is still going to give you that meal as output. You're still going to be eating whatever that chef came out with. Whereas the one on the right is much more stomachable. You're going to get a better answer. And the very last thing you need when you're building a workflow for a company that does nothing but PII and security data and cares about accuracy more than anything else and trust is delivering a product to your executive team that changes its answer every time they ask it and provides false information. That'd be a great way for me to go from lead data scientist to the unemployment line. This is a picture of an early build of an agentic workflow at InformData. This was a DAISY beta. You don't need to see all those things on there. That's okay. That's not the point. The point is that every single one of those rectangles represents a different step that the workflow takes between the time the user asked it a question and the time they got that info in their inbox. So you can imagine, just looking at it, that something like that is going to give you a much better response than you going in ChatGPT and taking the first answer like you're pressing "I'm feeling lucky" on Google or something. Let's talk about how we're going to build it then. Well, we're at the Domo.AI conference, so I'm going to say we're going to build it on Domo. But specifically, we built ours on Domo. And we did a lot of custom work with code, admittedly. But more importantly, we built it all in Domo. That program that you saw deliver that email was built entirely in Domo using out-of-the-box Domo tools available to us. We used workflows. We used the code engine. We obviously used the AI service layer. And we made that interface I showed you in the Pro Code Editor with JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. So let's build. Step one, preparation. How are we going to start? Big theme at 2024 Domo.AI was getting your data ready for AI. And that's going to be a big theme here too, because garbage in, garbage out, as always. If the data that you're putting into your chatbot isn't good, it doesn't matter how good the chatbot is. Your output's going to be trash. We need complete data sets. Incomplete data sets are conflicting information. You're going to get skewed results. You can't have a bunch of null values in here. You can't have a bunch of competing data types in the same column. You can't have a bunch of incorrect data in the same column. If a column on your data set says name, it shouldn't be having email addresses in there. If it says address, it shouldn't be having credit card numbers. This is all very basic stuff. And the new one, though, that you might not have thought about, metadata is your friend. Because detailed information about what the architecture of your data sets contain is going to be integral for how the chatbot is able to interpret how to act on them at a later step. And for the workflow to work, the data behind it must be trustworthy. There's that word again, trust. It's going to be a big theme here. But the data needs to be trustworthy too. Mindset that data cleanliness is everyone's job, from data engineers to business users, will maintain ongoing trust and readiness for AI. One of the most powerful things you can do is get the rest of the workplace involved with you in making sure that your data is accurate. And Domo is great for that. A lot of non-tech users can get in and understand that they still need to maintain a nice environment. They don't necessarily need to understand why at the technical level, but Domo makes it easy through all the tools they have for data preparation. Step two is going to be prompt engineering. Now, you may have heard this term before on the side of how you're prompting a chatbot. But there's no reason you can't have the chatbot do some prompt engineering on itself in the agentic workflow. So admin oversight is going to come first here. You're going to need the workflow to log the request in its original state. You should probably get stuff like the user asking. And of course, that last one there is huge. Evaluate it for security purposes. So whenever you interact with DAISY, for instance, the very first thing it's going to do is it's going to determine if you're asking a valid business intelligence question. If you're asking it where you can stream the latest season of Love Island online for free, I'm going to get a notice and we're going to have a talk. We're using the AI to craft the perfect output, so again, why not have it after we've cleared the question, start crafting the perfect input. This is where you can start integrating agents on your question itself. They can do things like check for correct spelling, grammar, reorganize sentence structure, and determine what areas of the business need to be addressed in order to answer your question. This can be done programmatically. This can be done with AI agents. Sky's the limit. We use a combination of both. But again, your user is not always going to ask the question in the most effective means possible. That doesn't mean that by the time the question gets searched, it's not in the most effective means possible, though. What that would look like is something like this. This is the Domo.AI example, version 1. It doesn't do anything, but I can go ahead and talk you through what you're likely going to see when you do build a working one of these for yourself in your own instance. So when that workflow starts, in this case, from the JavaScript interface we built for it. Doesn't necessarily need that. You can start it just from the workflows layer itself through text. However you go about that is fine. But the very first thing we're going to do is grab all that user detail. We're going to grab for some safety checks. We're going to grab for some prompt restructuring. Each one of those is an agent in the agentic workflow if it's AI powered, or it could just be a simple function you're calling, a collection of functions you're calling. For us, it's a collection of functions in the code engine package that we've written for ourselves in JavaScript and Python, and we have some AI work on the security side of it as well for context. But now we need to add the true agentic portion to the agentic workflow. And before we do that, we need to talk about what an agent is, because everyone in this room has been hearing that term for the past several years, or past year if you're new to this kind of thing. And some of you don't know what it means, which is totally fine, because tech likes to use confusing terms for things and put a bunch of keywords and buzzwords on everything. So an agent is the opposite of a jack of all trade. An agent is a highly specified interaction with the LLM that is designed to do one thing and one thing only in most cases, or at the very least, a very, very niche field of things that it is trained on. LLM-powered agents need to be written with clear, declarative, and, when needed, positive imperative sentences as guidelines. Also, guideline orders matter. This is a personal experience with this, but for example, we have a product called verifications. I was writing an agent interaction with a chatbot that was explaining what it should do when it came across a verification order versus what it should do when it came across a criminal order. To a human, that sentence makes perfect sense. You all understood exactly what I was just saying. However, because the word verification was in that sentence, when I put it under that line in the actual agent's instructions, it was returning verifications every time I ran it, because the chatbot was seeing the word, taking the context, and returning it in its actual output as an answer. Positive imperative, I had to look that up myself, don't worry, I'm not an English major. Essentially, instead of saying do not use this, say avoid using this. And the reason is, a chatbot is looking to complete a sentence in the most likely way using the context it knows in that sentence, which means that not is a red flag. That's a risk, because it may read that sentence as do use this, depending on how you have it. But avoid using this is a very clear, concise, distinct sentence that it's going to generate a better outcome from. And at the very least, provide LLM-powered agents an example of the desired output format you want. We call that structured zero-shot prompting. And the cool thing is it becomes few-shot prompting if you also provide examples of inputs that could lead to that output. So for example, I have an agent that works on revenue. I tell it that I want it to respond very clearly in more or less words. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, it's very long. But essentially, I say I want to know if the user is asking about revenue. If they are, respond what type of revenue. Net revenue is this. Product revenue is this. Automation revenue is this. So when that agent responds, it's been instructed exactly what to look for, and it's been instructed exactly how to respond. And when it responds in a key term like that, we can take the key term output by it, and we can run that through Python to do the rest of the stuff we need to do to it without worrying about the chatbot having to interact. We've used it for the example that it needed. It's done its job. It's no longer needed in that portion of the workflow. The other cool thing with that is you can give it inputs and output pairs to see what you need to happen. And if it violates any of that and it responds with some crazy hallucinations, you can have your workflow look for that and just either try it again until it does give you a proper response, or just annul the workflow and say that there was a security concern if it's timing out. Not all parts of a workflow should include AI. That is huge. I'm going to tell you a story. Last job I had, I ran a rotogravure printing press. I was responsible for all the calibrations in the cylinders in it. It was about 2 stories tall, 50 different computer systems, and we ran magazines, books, newsprints, anything you imagine. We printed runs of millions of different things. But the reason you need to know that is because at the end of that printing press's delivery system, sometimes our material handlers would have to take the product and box it. And we had these old reliable box machines where they would take the product and they'd put it, they'd take a box and they'd put it in the box machine. Box machine would use hydraulics to put the bottom of the box up. They would put the product in, send it down the line by hand, it would get taped up and go out the door. We had a district manager come in and buy a super complex box machine. This thing had sensors on it. You had to calibrate the size of the box. You hung the boxes on it, did all sorts of crazy shenanigans. But the key thing is, it was so overcomplicated that when the average user went to use it, the thing fell apart. It almost never worked, and it became a $10,000 paperweight in the corner of the room that people would just go back to the tried and true reliable method that does work. Same concept here. Just because we're empowering you to use AI in the workflow, opening the door to new things, doesn't mean the entire workflow needs to be AI. To be honest, it probably shouldn't, because you do need the actual reliable answers that traditional code provides tied in with the AI that you use to be able to get actionable and consistent results in the output of what you make. So for your example, you've done this. You've cleared the first stage that we went through, the paths have split, and now we have some agents. First agent is looking at customer information, second agent is looking at product information, and then we have a wait stage for those two things to finish. This is important because once those two agents are done, we're going to use their output as the input into the next step. So whatever those customer agents and product agents say are going to define our revenue agent. It may act differently if those first two agents that ran before it found some key terms that relate to them, but otherwise, we don't need to feed that information to the revenue agent because it's just noise at that point, and we're just confusing our chatbot. And then we have one more wait stage after that's done. Now we're going to get to the attempt. So this is the point where the workflow does the thing that the user expects it to. This can be powered by a specific AI agent, it can be run in static code, or it can even be a combination of both. So when you say you ask a chatbot a question and you get that answer back, this is where the key portion to get to that point is actually happening. For us, this is what that looks like. Once everything has been done, that function there that's searching for results is taking everything that Daisy has created, applying it to the data set that Daisy has created to run against, and it's going to get us our results. But just because we have a response doesn't mean the workflow is over. Remember, you need our results to be reliable. So just like you would QA a report that you wrote, you're going to check your titles in your columns are written properly. You're going to check your data types are consistent. You're going to check what you did makes sense. If you're running a SQL query and it comes back with no rows, your report's probably not done. We can use logic gateways to do this in the workflow, make sure that results exist and are within expected parameters. We can use custom QA agents, again tying into AI to make sure the output is consistent in format and vocabulary. And here's a big one. We can deobfuscate the data. Because remember back when I said that we made a chatbot that is completely reliable, that I can actually run this PII through? This is how. What Daisy is actually doing is taking your question, deciding on what course of action would likely lead to a good answer, and then creating a dummy data set in its own memory, a schema that it can build Python against, depending on if it's using a pandas data frame, can write SQL against if it's a SQL data set, but it can essentially say, hey, I've made all these answers. This is how I would go about getting the data. Well, the cool thing is in Domo, you could do something with what it said, this is how I would go about getting the data with. You can run it programmatically. So if you build your workflow this way, what you've actually done is you're going to search for results with the SQL, Python, JavaScript, whatever method you're using, it doesn't matter wherever you store your data. What you're doing is you're going to take the results of the AI that's inputted and said, hey, this is how I would likely do this in this situation. You're going to deobfuscate it so it goes back to your actual column names in your real data set and your actual columns and your actual data sets in your database that the AI has never seen. And you're going to run it programmatically so you get an answer. And now you've kind of gamed the system. You've gone about and used AI to generate a prompt, a schema. You've engineered all of it. You've QA'd all of it. And now it's actually done it, and the AI has never touched the data to even realize that it's attempting to in the first place. And that's what that would be here. So now we've gone through our agents, we've gone through our attempt, we've deobfuscated it, and then we've taken and we've done some programmatic deobfuscation after that just to check formatting, syntax, everything you need to do. For us, this is point, we take the JSON object that's created there, we turn it into an HTML table, and we send it in an encrypted email, which you saw at the very beginning of the presentation. Wrapping up on this then, Let's talk about key points to know for using the agentic approach to talk that complex data. So you should consider an agentic workflow when you can't anticipate every possible question or command from users. If you can anticipate every possible thing a user might do with your code, you don't need AI. Write some programming for it. No need to get AI involved. If your output needs to be generated based on uncommon or business-specific context, an agentic workflow is ideal. So again, these custom agents are a great time for you to take something like an OpenAI LLM model and leverage it with your own custom instructions to feed it the knowledge that it needs to answer in a way that is modeled to your business, without OpenAI having to go spend gazillions of dollars retraining their custom LLMs on whatever industry you're working on. And when you need to offer a more natural, interactive experience with the data beyond the dashboards or static code, something like an agentic workflow with a user portal where the user can go in and type those plain text questions is a great solution to that. When you're designing your agents, you should clearly define the agent's goal and make sure it stays in its lane. Again, this is something that's designed to operate with the same intent every single time. You would not overwhelm it by giving it a bunch of unrelated instructions that end up being noise 90% of the time. You're going to provide operational guidelines, relevant terminology, and instructions so the agent knows what it can and cannot do. Clear examples. Remember, it's going to take everything you say at literal face value, so make sure you're saying it clearly. And you're going to offer it sample prompts and desired outputs to keep those responses accurate and consistent. For security, and you're also going to monitor and regularly fine-tune or retrain based on user feedback and evolving needs. Yeah, I always forget to log things too, I get it. For tips to uphold compliance and security, well, Domo has Domo.GPT. It's got other AI providers. It's got all sorts of administrative features in the AI service layer. It's got a workflows tool set and code engines with all sorts of things in-house for you to work on, so your data never has to leave the Domo environment. You can log everything it does. Again, workflows tool gives you the output of every variable in it at every step of the workflow. So for me, when I'm going back and I'm doing my review on how something worked, it's a godsend. It's wonderful. But you can also structure your workflow so the AI agents are crafting a safe path for requests by generating a query, for example, rather than directly executing the actions on the data itself in its context window. And I'll give you a little bit of closing advice that we had work for us too. There's no reason the agentic workflow has to be the only thing with guidelines. If you need to nudge your users to prompt it a little better and you see that they're not quite getting there, something like this, where they have a form where they can drag and drop columns or stats or key terms that you've already defined, great way to go about that while still giving them, in this case, that box that says special requests, an area to free-form type text that then would kick off the agentic workflow and take only that specific portion of their answer into consideration. So again, the less we have to give the AI, the more consistent it's going to be. The better we write the AI, the more consistent it's going to be. And this is how I am not yet fired from InformData. I have about 5 minutes left for some quick questions. If you have any, please raise your hand. A mic will be provided to you from the back. I hate to leave real fast after those 5 minutes. I have to have a bus at 5, so.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Quick question on the QA step, which I thought was a great idea. You mentioned obfuscation. Were you obfuscating the content or the metadata?
So we're actually obfuscating the schema instructions itself.
Yeah.
In this case, the AI has never seen the metadata or the actual column headers or any of the real values in the column. It's getting dummy information that's generated at random every time the data set's run. The keys to decrypt that is being stored in a Python function not connected to AI. And then when the AI writes its SQL based on what it thinks you're asking, it then runs through that and deobfuscates it back into what's then run against your data set. It's just an additional security step. Again, I wanted to make this as airtight as possible. If we don't need to provide training data to other people, we're not going to. Thanks. Got a question up here in the red shirt? Oh, sorry, got a mic coming for you.
I missed step 5, if you wouldn't mind pulling that one back up.
Yeah, so that's just the QA step. Let me go ahead and take you there. I'm going to go back a little bit. There you go. And this is just where we're taking our QA agents either through, the custom agentic ones that we've written to do specific things, or where we're taking traditional programmatic QA and just running through, making sure data is consistent, making sure some results came back, and then preparing for the email. Got one question up here in the green.
So I work for an agency that does marketing data. One of the issues we're having is that each client has different terminology, different things. How do we build, which pieces can we say these are always set in stone for any client? Which pieces do we have to kind of custom build to incorporate the different keywords, languages?
It's a really good question. When we prompt our search engine with this, our actual search agent that takes all the pieces and puts it together, we have a set of instructions in it that we call standard instructions that go with every single prompt. And then, based on what the user has defined, the rest of the agents that defined context will present their own special guidelines that go with that context that get added into a block and asked at that point. For your use case, I'd probably suggest taking something that identifies the client and then having whatever custom guidelines you have attributed to that client, if it's found, added into that special instruction block, and then put into that dynamic piece of it when it's asked to the agent. Okay, looks like that's all the questions. So again, thanks guys, thanks for bearing with me. I know everyone's tired, but hopefully you got something of value about that.